So let's go into abiogenesis. How about that? So, and abiogenesis for the audience is the creation of life from non-life. Is this a fair description?
Yes.
Yeah. So my first question to you is like this. So science explainers, and those are the people who would go and give, shows to people to tell them science in a simple way. They pretend that science has got life's origin figured out. And I guess your course was motivated by one specific science explainer who claimed that this is not a big deal and, talked about agendas and stuff. So my question to you, is that what one will find upon reviewing the real scientific literature? So if one grabs the papers and opens them, will he find that, the paper starts by saying this is a done deal and this is how it's happened? So is this what's there in the books, or it's an artifact of science explainers?
Well, certainly it's there in textbooks. But it's not there in the hardcore literature. And even the hardcore literature makes lots of unwarranted claims where they'll say they're just at the threshold. It's just a matter of evolution. It's just a matter of a million years of time from this point. But those are fallacious claims. Those are fallacious because you look for the details. It's not there. It's not there in the paper. And what happens is the uninitiated, the non-scientist reads those papers and they will pull that quote out and say, see, it says here in a peer-reviewed paper. Well, this is my argument. Even the peer-reviewed papers are full of trash. They're full of nonsensical comments. And so what happens is the people who write these papers, they never say these sort of things to me because I know it's so easy for me to challenge them on that. They will say these sorts of things to the press, and the press will take this and run with it. Or they will allow these sorts of things to go unchallenged into textbooks, such that so many people are misled. And you saw on that series, I talked about surveys that were done, which 80% of the people had college degrees of one type or another, between an associate's 2-year degree to PhD. And something like 70% of them, of the people, thought that scientists had made simple bacteria in a laboratory. Something like 60% of them thought that scientists had created simple life like a frog. A frog is not simple life, but
it's more complex than a fly.
Right, but where did they get this? They got this from textbooks that say this sort of nonsense. So yes, this is pretend. This is not true, and so the world is highly deceived on this, unfortunately.
Actually, I had this one very, very long conversation, a written one, like 90 posts or something, with one very famous science explainer, and he actually went on his show later and he put it in the open, and what he said, he told me this: I told you that textbooks, and he pointed to a specific university textbook, and it says that novelty comes from random mutation, so you cannot say no, because then you are talking against, a university textbook. So he said, if you're not agreeing with the textbook, then he's talking to me, then you have no credibility. So I tell him, so does anything that goes in a textbook has to be true? Is this the new definition of truth? And it's miserable because when people who are not in, you're an authority, I can say, in your field, but when people who see that this does not make sense from another field like information theory or something, and talking to normal people, they would say, but it's in the textbook, and it really makes it hard. And so it's really miserable. So let me ask you this now. Even origins, now this is the bad one. So science explainers, maybe they are there for, making nice episodes or something, or a show. But even the origin scientists on the media act as if the matter is almost a done deal and that gaps are small. And I have it in mind, one of those guys who calls himself a professor. I went to his channel and I said, why are you saying this? And he just went ballistic and angry and started throwing things at me. So why is this a characteristic to the field of origins and evolution, in your opinion? I think we talked about that when we talked about anger, but I don't know. Is this scientists should? What should be the normal attitude of a scientist when something is not clear through science, in your opinion? I've seen you say we don't know so many times. Why don't they do it?
Scientists want to get. I don't know why people are pushing this as if they really know it. I can see how the non-scientists, like the people who say that they're professors and they have YouTube channels, I can see how they would not know. They just don't understand. They read something in a paper that says, the origins of chirality are solved. We have so many ways to get at this, and then they accept it without looking at the details that this isn't solved at all. So if they just read the papers, they're deceived. So in some ways, they're the victim. They're a victim. They're victim of this type of writing in these papers. It really harkens back to the scientist. And so the responsibility is actually with them. This has to be deposited right at their feet. Why are they coming with this and saying that we've got this thing figured out, here's a way it happens, when they see the difficulties and they understand what I'm talking about? They understand the difficulties of the things that I am putting forward. You see that no scientists have come out and taken that challenge that I put forward. You see that scientists are not coming out and dealing with the unprotected sites. I mean, these things are hard problems. Why they're not coming out and saying this? Well, if you're in the field of the origin of life, you have to continue to have funding for your research, and you have to continue to support that. So you're not going to say we don't know what's happening. You've got to say each year we're closer to this thing, each year we're closer to this. But now I'm able to get them. And this is what I'm going to start to do, because they have said this and they've given time frames for when this thing will be solved. But because so many of their talks have now been recorded on the internet, I can start holding them to account.
Time frame. They have given time frames.
They have given time frames for solving.
And what kind of time frame did they give? This is new to me. Maybe I missed it.
Yeah, like a couple of years, 2 years.
2 years.
Yeah. We will have this.
Wow.
So that was 10 years ago. So now I'm able to go back and start calling this thing out there. And you see how this game is played. You keep saying we're close, we're solving this problem, and you keep getting support, you keep getting funding for it. Now, it's not like Origin of Life is a highly funded field. It's not. It is a boutique of a field. But they have a very influential voice in textbooks, in the way science is taught. It goes way beyond what the impact they should have for the science that they generate. It's really a small number of scientists working on this. So, it's nowhere near the funding that is given, for example, for making electronic devices or something. No, it's nothing to that scale. But even what they have a huge impact, though. And they have a huge impact, and you can see their impact based on the surveys that I had cited in there, that people are thoroughly confused on this thing. So really, all of this harkens back to them. And so they have to be held accountable for what they're saying. And that's going to start now being my target. I'm going to hold them accountable. I have their words. I have it recorded. And now we're going to start going after, because they've got to be careful what they say, because it's these YouTubers are, in a sense, the victims, because they take their words and they run with it. The poor press is clueless. These people in the press are absolutely clueless. They got their degrees in journalism, so it means that they're very good writers. But they don't know how to assess the science. So they hear scientists and they write articles. And very often, I know this because I talk to the press a lot, I would say 80% of the time I am given the opportunity to vet the article before it appears. And I can say, no, you've extrapolated this too much. Let's back off on this. because the press loves to ramp things up because that's their business. If you can embellish something, that'd be great. It's up to the scientists to pull back on the reins and to say, slow down here. We really can't say this. We can't go in this direction.
Maybe they don't slow down. Maybe they let them just go, because I've seen some of them come into YouTube channels and amazingly they say some, very long shots,
But that will not go unchallenged.
Yeah. So it's music to my ear.
That will be the next target.
I'm really, this is really music to my ears to hear that you'll be doing this, because once I had this other, debate with a science explainer, and he said at the end, Ahmed, you're giving me opinion. I'm referring to papers. And all I have is peer-reviewed papers. If this is what they say, this is what I say. And I say, okay.
But they don't have, the poor folks don't have the ability to assess the peer-reviewed paper. As you saw in my talk, in that I said, here is what they say, but here are the results from their paper. And I would go right back to the experimental sections, the supplementary information, and look at their own data and say, here's what their own data shows, how they made this extrapolation. So people will look at a peer-reviewed paper and grab one sentence without looking at the data itself, because the data is highly embellished. Now, look, as a scientist, I know how this game is played. I know how this is done. And so I realize, these things take place because you want to project your science. But now it's gotten way out of hand to where the poor man or woman on the street is thoroughly confused, thinking that scientists, they've made cellular life. Even scientists have made simple things like frogs in a laboratory. They're so wrong on this that we got to pull back.
So let me ask you this question as a start. Now, I've been doing my work about, looking into this RNA world hypothesis and LUCA and mutations and stuff. And I have been struck by the immense error rate when it comes to RNA replication versus DNA. So my question to you is it possible that there would be life based on RNA? I mean, a cell that does not have DNA at all, not a virus, a living cell that has RNA as its genetic material, given the huge RNA error rate compared to DNA. And I've, for example, went into literature and I saw that even after replication, a living cell, due to ultraviolet and other environmental conditions, will have its DNA damaged, and then it gets repaired by repair mechanisms. But there isn't the same thing for RNA. So there is no, up to what I have read, there is no RNA-based living cell today. So how come somebody would speculate that there were RNA-based living things at some point of time? As a chemist, do you think there can be a stable living cell that has no DNA whatsoever and only has RNA as its basic material, genetics? Is this possible? Did you see it?
I don't see it. Many people have suggested it. Other people, including many scientists, materialistic scientists, are saying that can't be. The problem with RNA, well, first of all, RNA is more complex than DNA is, in that each one of the bases is hooked up to a sugar that has one more stereogenic center than that in DNA. So it's actually more complex than is DNA. RNA is. It's not simpler, it's more complex. But the problem with RNA is its shelf life is very short. I'm talking on the order of minutes. So if, for example, you look, minutes.
Versus how much in DNA? Versus how much for, just so we feel the comparison.
DNA can be under the right conditions, can be thousands of years.
Okay, so minutes versus thousands of years.
Yeah. I mean, and RNA. Now, if you take both in an aqueous system, DNA is many orders of magnitude more stable than is RNA, because RNA will self-decompose. So just by itself, the 2' hydroxyl comes around and hits the leaving group on the 3' hydroxyl and breaks the chain. Number two is the fact that you have both the 2' and the 3' can assemble. And when you hook together via the 2', it's not innocuous. it makes what's called siRNA, small interfering RNA, which slows down, which binds up to other RNAs and stops the replication process. So it's really deleterious. But this is why, for example, these vaccines, you have Moderna and Pfizer. One of them, Pfizer, was originally stored at minus 80 degrees centigrade, but now they've packaged it in a liposome or in a lipid layer to try to protect it, but still it has to be stored at 0 degrees and used very rapidly. This stuff has to be used very rapidly because the shelf life is very short, and that's only because it's packaged and there are things in there that and you have to keep it totally free of other ions. How do you do that in an environment? Our environment is full of sodium, full of magnesium. You have magnesium around. Magnesium is a big problem with these things. And so these things are unstable. So RNA is unstable, but plus you don't have the information. Just hooking a bunch of nucleotides together and claiming that that's RNA. No, that's not RNA. That's like taking computer code and just vomiting it out there, just randomly, putting do loops here and there. I mean, it doesn't do you any good. There has to be some code behind it. So this gets into your area.
I need to stop you here because this is my next question. So it says, I just remember this quote of yours, and it's like that you make molecules for a living. So my question to you, since you make molecules for a living, and this must need so much information about what molecule and what function, how might RNA-based precursors could have acquired the needed information? And as a chemist who builds nano machines, do you see maybe there is some experiment in chemistry that is encouraging people that you would put some RNA in a test tube and, fast forward the reaction and wait until it produces a nanocar or something? Do you use trial and error to create these things like genetic algorithms, or this is, complete science fiction?
Yeah, so our RNA has a very short shelf life. So even when it's made, it's decomposing much more rapidly than the thing is made. So that's one problem. But the other problem is the ordering, the sequence of these. That's the informational code. Nobody knows where that came from. Could you have information from randomness? The answer is yes. It's called Shannon information. But Shannon information does not give you the specified information that you need to construct a cell. Shannon information grabs these pieces of randomness, but informaticians have clearly said that this Shannon-like information, which comes from information science when you're dealing with radio signals, that random type of grabbing this embedded information in randomness is not sufficient. You have to have what's called specified information in order to build cellular structure. So we don't know where the information came from. And you say, well, one randomly formed and happened to have the information. Okay, but what happens in 5 minutes when several of those pieces have been broken up? Now what? So that information is gone. And the chances of reassembling that become really, really small. So we're talking about the chances of assembling a viable RNA, something like 1 over 10 to the 40th. I mean, the numbers are so vanishingly small. So say one forms, its shelf life is very short, its half-life is very short, and then if it had the informational code, within minutes that informational code is going to be lost, never to ever form again. That's it. That's it. Even in the lifetime of the universe, a scientific lifetime of the universe, when you have 1 over 10 to the 40th, it's just too short. It's just too short. And so the problem there is information. And then even if you were to take RNA, so you have one strand of RNA, what's that going to do? Can that strand of RNA make for you then the peptide that you need to do the enzymatic assembly? You can't have RNA start building peptides by itself. It has to have exogenous other enzymes assisting it to do that. And you have to have all these other peptides available to it with the right stereochemistry. It can't be achiral. It all has to be chiral. And you can't do these chemical assemblies just like that. I mean, you have to have enzymes that help you to do this. So all of this is a real problem.
So let's say, number one, it has no objective function, so it doesn't know what it wants to create. And number two, even if it creates something, it doesn't have memory, so it loses it so much, so fast, to the extent it starts from scratch. And since it doesn't know what it's going to create, so it has no direction. So only somebody who is really not throwing long shots, but super long shots, would think of this. Would you agree to this statement?
Yeah, I'd agree in the sense that there is no end game here. Molecules, as I've often said, do not care about life. They're not moving toward life. Molecules have never been known to move toward life. Organisms, living organisms, move toward life. Molecules do not move toward life. They actually move away from life. They move to a far more disordered state. And so this is not what molecules move toward. Just the simple self-assemblies that you get, the self-assembled monolayer, those are regular patterns, A, B, A, B, A, B. They're not the non-regular patterns that you need to create life. If you deal in systems, I mean, you can't build any complexity through regular patterns of A, or A, B. You have to have non-regular patterns. We have non-regular patterns within our DNA that give us this complexity of life. You can't build this complexity just with regular patterns that you would get from a thermodynamic self-assembly.